Let me welcome to the program the senator from the state of Arkansas, Senator Tom Cotton. Senator, welcome to Washington Watch.
Hey, Tony, it's great to be on with you again.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I ended up having a conversation with myself about this, but I want to ask you this question. As we look at what's happening in Russia, last month, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs said that Russia poses the greatest threat to the United States. We see them moving in the opposite direction that they should be going when it comes to the New START treaty that the Obama administration negotiated with them in 2010. Are we looking at the return of what Ronald Reagan called the evil empire?
Well, Tony, unfortunately, Russia has gotten much more dangerous over the last 7 years under President Obama, but really over the last 16 years since Vladimir Putin's rise to power. Russia, in a way, is the number one threat we face and always will be, because Russia alone has the nuclear arsenal to destroy the United States, to perhaps eliminate the human race if it came to that nuclear war. That's one reason why it's so important that, as Reagan did, we draw firm lines with Russian aggression, whether that's Russian aggression in Georgia in 2008, in Ukraine in 2014, or in the Middle East, in Syria in 2015 and 2016. And as you mentioned about the New START treaty, that was a one-sided treaty that favored Russia's development of new nuclear weapons against the United States, which had to draw down our arsenal. And just last week in the latest data exchange, we learned that, strangely, they have a larger number of warheads now, not to mention the much larger arsenal of tactical nuclear weapons they have. This is a very troubling development for the United States, and therefore a troubling development for the whole world.
When you look at this and you say a one-sided agreement negotiated with Russia by the United States, we're drawing down, they're building up, this sounds like a pattern. I mean, it's also what we're seeing in Iran.
We saw it with Cuba as well. No, it is a pattern, Tony, that the president, especially after the interview that Jeff Goldberg did with him in the Atlantic Monthly recently, clearly thinks that the United States foreign policy over the last several decades has not served United States interests. That we've got too many allies around the world, that they're free riders that tend to just draw us into problems, and that the enemies we have, enemies like Iran, are in part, maybe in large part, of our own making, and greater understanding, greater concessions, and conciliation with those enemies would help protect U.S. interests. I would think 7 years of reality would dissuade the president from these views. I mean, extending a hand to Iran has only made them more aggressive throughout the Middle East and got them a one-sided nuclear deal. The so-called Russian reset has done nothing to reset relations with Vladimir Putin, except for resetting them on his own terms. And then, as I mentioned, in Cuba, it's probably the least strategically consequential decision because of that nation's small, impoverished status. But it's even more one-sided than any other policy the president has had. He consistently has coddled and appeased our adversaries and treated our allies with contempt and disdain.
So, Senator Cotton, with that in mind, I mean, we live in a very dangerous world when you consider that, as you said, Russia, because of their capacity, is our greatest threat. But you look at the Middle East, you look at China, look at North Korea. The next president who comes into the Oval Office is going to walk in on day one with a very difficult situation staring them right in the face.
That's true, Tony. And the next president is going to have some of the most diverse, complex, and challenging security threats that the United States has faced, not just since the end of the Cold War, but since the end of World War II. And you have the rest of the world, most of which is friendly towards the United States to greater or lesser degrees, is looking for a United States that will once again lead in the world, that will help provide a framework for international security as we have for 70 years. 70 pretty good years, I would have to add. 70 years in which we have not had an outbreak of great power war, as we did twice in the first half of the 20th century and innumerable times before that. In fact, I was visiting recently with the head of state of one of our NATO allies, a small country, but a critical country that does unique things for us no other country could do in the world. And we asked the head of state what more that we should tell our colleagues back in Washington. And that head of state said, "You need a new U.S. president who understands the need for leadership in the world." That's pretty stark.
Well, that sums it up. I mean, that's exactly what's needed. Senator, I want to thank you for taking time to join us this afternoon. I want to ask you one final question. As I know you serve on the Armed Services Committee in the Senate, on the Senate Intelligence Committee. You're also a combat veteran in the United States Army. So I know you're very plugged in and concerned about our nation's military. What's going to happen for us to rebuild our military and bring it to a point where it has the strength to secure our peace?
The military needs a substantial budget increase, Tony. You can dig down in the numbers and get exact figures, but I think we're looking on an order of magnitude of about $100 billion more, hopefully under a new administration, an emergency spending bill. And that's going to have to be dedicated towards today's readiness, equipping and training our troops and manning their units, all of which have declined under the Obama administration. It also has to go to modernization of our conventional forces, like our aircraft carrier fleet, or purchasing new or more joint strike fighters, building out new land vehicles for the Army and the Marine Corps, and then finally to modernizing our nuclear arsenal, which is as old as it's ever been. We're going to have to design new nuclear weapons. We need to modernize the missiles that carry them. We're in the process of building a brand new bomber and building new ballistic missile submarines. All three of those things are going to happen, and it's going to be a substantial investment of new money. But I don't think there's any better return than for the American taxpayer than investing in their military, not only to fight and win our wars, but hopefully to deter them from ever happening in the first place, because our military supremacy is unmatched in the world.
Right, and that was Ronald Reagan's view: peace through strength. The morale. I mean, we're seeing a low in the morale. We've seen the highest rates of suicide among those who serve in uniform. The social policy that has been thrust upon the military by this administration, which has made this a very complex and troubling situation. Is there a way to unwind that and bring back the morale of those who serve?
No, you're certainly right about some of those concerns, Tony, and this goes back as well to the budget crunch our military has faced. If you look at the Army, they've been losing over 10,000 troops per year from their high a few years ago. That's not just bad for our national security, because we might lack adequate troop numbers to deter and, if necessary, fight the next war, which is a problem we had in the early days of the last war. But it's also very bad for morale of our troops. When you're an E7 or you're a major and you're told that there's not enough spots for you, when you get a letter saying you're going to have to retire early and therefore your retirement's going to be a little lower, you're not going to be able to continue to serve out in a job in which you take great pride, that's very harmful for our morale. Also harmful for our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, not just today, but for tomorrow as well, because we're losing thousands of years of collective combat experience. And you can always make a new private or a new lieutenant in a few months, but you can't give them the kind of battle-hardened experience that our senior non-commissioned officers and our field-grade officers have received over the last 15 years.
That's absolutely right. And I've had that conversation with General Boykin here on my team numerous times. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. As always, appreciate having the conversation.
Great to be on with you, Tony. Thank you very much.
All right. Senator Tom Cotton.